There has been much discussion about capitalism, the current economic system in the Western world, as there are signs of capitalism's failure everywhere. Just 2 decades into the 21st century, and it is evident that capitalism has some major flaws as a social system. It has evolved from a historically necessary and creative system at its inception to a historically unnecessary and destructive system in the 21st century. So, what are the major flaws or drawbacks of capitalism? Let's find out. In the mid-1900s, sociologist Karl Marx, who was also known as the father of communism, coined the term capitalism, which he defines as any private ownership of a property or an enterprise. Economists now define capitalism as an economic system in which capital goods are owned by private individuals or businesses. A market economy produces goods and services based on supply and demand in the general market, rather than through central planning, which is known as a planned economy or command economy. In simpler words, it is a system based on free markets and limited government intervention. The main motivation of the players in this system is to make profit. The United States is arguably the most well-known country with a capitalist economy, which many citizens see as a necessary component of democracy and the realization of the American dream. Capitalism, like any other system, cannot be described as the ultimate system because it does not cure every flaw in human affairs or eliminate all inequalities. However, it remains in our society because of its ability to change and develop countries. Proponents of capitalism argue that it is the most efficient economic system, allowing for higher living standards. However, despite its pervasiveness, many economists criticize aspects of capitalism, pointing out its numerous flaws and problems. Hence, capitalism, like everything else, has several drawbacks, such as negative externalities, including a disproportionate distribution of wealth or income, as well as high unemployment rates and economic instability due to the cyclical nature of the capitalistic system. Many economists have also labeled capitalism as evil, because capitalism disregards people's needs, which then leads to wealth inequality, and it does not promote equal opportunity as well. Furthermore, capitalism promotes mass consumption, which is unsustainable, and it also encourages business owners to harm the environment for financial gain, which results in environmental damage, short-termism, excess materialism, and boom and bust economic cycles. So, first let's talk about one of the major drawbacks that why capitalism is bad for poor. Well, it breeds competition between countries and perpetuates poverty in developing countries because private corporations prioritize their own interests over the needs of their employees. In a capitalist system in which only a few members of society own the means of production and distribution of goods and services, the wealth of an entire nation could be controlled by a few wealthy individuals and families. The rest of the people, who rely on the generosity of the wealthy through jobs offered to them, live paycheck to paycheck. Hence, the nation's wealth is not evenly distributed among the majority of its citizens. According to the New York Times, the richest 1% of the country's total population controls roughly 38% of all privately held wealth in the United States of America, which is the world's upholder of capitalism. In contrast, 73% of the debt owed in the United States is owed by 90% of the population. The economist Thomas Piketty wrote the influential book Capital in the 21st Century, in which he highlighted capitalism's tendency to increase inequality. Similarly, Karl Marx, a 19th century economist, saw capitalism as a system that would gradually exploit the poor and that they would eventually rebel. Capitalists argue that a capitalist society is fair because you reap the benefits of your hard work. However, many people become wealthy simply by inheriting wealth or being born into a privileged class. As a result, capitalist society not only fails to create equality of outcome, but also fails to provide equality of opportunity. Moreover, the labor is also undervalued. In a capitalist system, the desire to maximize profits all the time leads to wealthy industrialists not paying their employees in accordance with their level of productivity. Workers, too, are sometimes unable to bargain with industry owners to be paid what they are truly worth, owing to a lack of bargaining power. Even in countries where workers' rights are protected, it is still not easy. Then there is a propensity for industrial unrest. There is often a power struggle between industrial owners who want to pay less in wages and salaries to increase their profit margins and workers who believe their wages should be increased in proportion to the effort they put into the production of goods and services. This power struggle causes industrial unrest, which then disrupts societal peace. Another main drawback of capitalism can be too much focus on making profit. Now, you must be thinking, how is that a problem? Profit comes first in a capitalist society. Companies that own both production and supply companies will compete for the highest profit. Their products are sold at the highest possible price while keeping their cost as low as possible. Moreover, capitalism lacks any human touch. It is concerned about the social needs of the majority of the population. People who are concerned about their own finances will avoid helping their fellow humans because they are preoccupied with looking after themselves. For example, firms use price discrimination theories to charge higher prices to customers who want to skip the line. This makes sense from the standpoint of profit maximization. However, if we have a society in which the wealthy can pay to skip a line at a fairground or pay to see a congressman sooner, it erodes social norms and a sense of fair play. Some drug manufacturers become so greedy for profit that they continue commercial production even when it is proven that the drug has negative side effects for users. The third major flaw of capitalism is that its environmental cost is enormous. In a capitalist system, the desire for profit sometimes drives business leaders to extremes, all for the sake of profit. So, firms in a profit-driven economy are more likely to ignore externalities such as factory-generated pollution or natural resource exploitation. While capitalism allows for lower prices and greater availability in the short term, it depletes the natural resources and reduces a society's overall quality of life. Some business entities' byproducts are harmful to the environment, but these byproducts are not disposed of properly, causing harm to the environment. And this results in significant economic costs such as pollution, global warming, acid rain, and the extinction of rare species, external costs that will harm future generations. This environmental degradation is not only bad for the Earth and the species that live on it, but it's also expensive. The United States spent $306 billion on climate-related disasters in 2017. In fact, even capitalist supporters will admit the government provision of certain public goods and services is necessary to maximize the potential of a capitalist society. The next flaw is monopoly. Capitalism creates the need to monopolize. Because capitalism is a free market, a single company can become all-powerful and dominate a market. When this occurs, a company can charge whatever price it wants, and consumers have no choice but to pay more. So, what usually happens is that the largest companies in each industry pay attention as new businesses try to sell goods or services to consumers. They will acquire businesses through mergers and acquisitions in order to reduce the number of competitors who could disrupt their pricing mechanisms. The ultimate goal is always monopolization. If a company can monopolize a market, it can set its own price for goods or services, reducing rather than increasing consumer choice. And this is how a business becomes too big to fail. Governments provide assets and subsidies to the wealthiest individuals and corporations because they are the drivers of society. This practice can result in the misappropriation of funds, poor investment decisions, and other financial problems that affect everyone in society. For example, during the recession years of 2007 to 2009, the United States offered bailouts to several companies to keep them from failing due to the negative consequences that society as a whole would face if this occurred. So, capitalism gives rise to large, powerful corporations that form monopolies and exploit consumer desires and needs by constantly raising prices and limiting supply. Lastly, it leads to financial instability. The financial crisis is one facet of the systemic and converging crises of capitalism. Contrary to what capitalist economists would argue, capitalism produces not on the basis of what society requires, but on the basis of what is profitable in order to survive. As a result, an infinite supply of commodities is pumped into the market. The market eventually reaches a breaking point as it becomes saturated with commodities that cannot be sold. The system then enters a crisis of overproduction. Capitalism is based on financial markets, stocks, bonds, and money markets, but financial markets are notorious for causing booms and busts. Hence, if market sentiment shifts, this boom could quickly turn into a crash. These market crashes can lead to economic downturns, recessions, and job losses. Capitalism has experienced prolonged recessions, the 1930s and 2008s, periods of mass unemployment, and a decline in living standards at various times. So, we have now reached a point in the 21st century where the externalities of this irrational system, such as the costs of war, the depletion of natural resources, the waste of human lives, and the disruption of the planetary environment, far outweigh any future economic benefits that capitalism offers to society as a whole. Although capitalism is not always the best economic system, but it is preferable to socialism, fascism, and communism. Most countries have adopted modified versions of capitalism that require only limited government participation. The challenge is to prevent the government from gaining too much power and becoming its own monopoly. Hence, capitalism is not a problem, unregulated capitalism is a problem. So, what are your thoughts on this? Do share your views in the comment section below. And if you found this video informative and enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button, as we frequently upload such informative videos. Thanks for watching.